On a Sunday night, more than 100 million people are all doing the same thing at the same time. Stadiums are roaring. Bars are packed shoulder to shoulder. Entire cities seem to pause as everyone stares at the same glowing screen, waiting for one ball to cross one line. It's loud, emotional, electric. For a few hours, nothing else in the world seems to matter. And then there's the other scene. A quiet apartment, a desk lamp, someone reading, coding, sketching ideas, maybe watching a documentary with the volume low. No jerseys, no shouting, no play-by-play updates. They know the game is happening. They just don't feel pulled toward it. Not because they're trying to be different, not because they think they're above it. It simply doesn't grip their attention, which is strange if you think about it, because modern sports aren't just games anymore. They're perfectly engineered attention machines. Constant suspense, unpredictable outcomes, wins, losses, tribal rivalries, last-second comebacks. It's basically a dopamine factory, the same psychological loop that keeps people refreshing social media or binge-watching cliffhangers. Every play promises something exciting might happen next. For most brains, that's irresistible. So when someone feels nothing, no urge to check scores, no emotional spike, no obsession, that's not random. It's psychological. And once you understand what's happening under the surface, how attention, reward systems, and certain thinking styles interact, it starts to explain why some minds get hooked, while others quietly opt out. Before we go any further, it's important to slow this down and clear something up, because topics like this can accidentally sound judgmental fast. This isn't about smart people good, sports fans bad. That's not only unfair, it's psychologically wrong. Human brains just aren't built the same way. Some people feel alive in loud stadiums, high-fiving strangers, riding the emotional roller coaster of a close game. Others feel drained by that same environment and would rather spend those hours alone with a book, a project, or their own thoughts. Neither reaction is more evolved. They're just different forms of stimulation. It's a lot like food. Some people love spicy meals that make their eyes water. Others taste the same dish and think, why would anyone do this to themselves? Or think about music. One person blasts heavy bass at the gym. Another prefers quiet piano while working. Nobody argues that one taste is morally superior. It's just preference. Attention works the same way. What feels thrilling to one brain feels noisy to another. What feels relaxing to one person feels boring to someone else. We all have slightly different thresholds for excitement, novelty, and focus. So if you're someone who never really understood the hype around big games, there's nothing wrong with you. And if you love them, there's nothing wrong with that either. We're not diagnosing a flaw here. We're just looking at wiring. And once you see it through that lens, temperament and cognitive style instead of better or worse, the question becomes a lot more interesting. What is it about certain minds that simply don't get hooked in the first place? Now here's where things get a little more subtle and a little more interesting. Because when we talk about intelligent people in this context, we're not talking about IQ scores or some hierarchy where one group is better than another. Intelligence isn't a trophy you either have or don't. It's more like a style of curiosity, a way your mind prefers to engage with the world. Some brains light up when there's fast action and emotional suspense. Other brains light up when there's complexity to untangle, patterns to decode, systems to understand, ideas to play with. The stimulation isn't in watching something happen. It's in figuring something out. Think about the difference between watching a game and solving a puzzle. Both can be fun, but they scratch very different mental itches. Spectating is reactive. You're following events as they unfold. Problem solving is participatory. You're manipulating variables, predicting outcomes, building models in your head. For people with a strong pull toward abstract thinking, the second type often feels more satisfying. Their brain keeps quietly asking, where's the complexity? Where's the mental friction? What am I actually doing with my mind right now? And if the answer is just watching other people perform, the stimulation can fade pretty quickly. Not because it's beneath them. It just doesn't engage their preferred circuitry. You'll see this pattern everywhere. Some people unwind by watching 3 hours of highlights. Others unwind by reading about astrophysics, designing a side project, or falling into a rabbit hole about history or psychology. To an outsider, that might look like work, but to them it feels relaxing because thinking deeply is the reward. So a useful question isn't, are you smart or not? It's simpler than that. What actually feels mentally satisfying to you? Do you crave intensity or complexity? Because that difference alone can quietly shape whether a stadium feels thrilling or just noisy. And this isn't just armchair theory or internet speculation. Psychologists have actually been circling around this pattern for years. If you look at personality research, especially studies around the big 5 traits, there's one trait that keeps popping up in interesting ways: openness to experience. Researchers often describe it as intellectual curiosity, preference for ideas over routines, enjoyment of abstract thinking, imagination, exploration. And consistently, people who score higher in openness tend to spend their free time differently. They're a little less drawn to purely passive entertainment, and a little more drawn to things that feel mentally engaging: reading, learning, creating, analyzing, tinkering with hobbies that make them think. Not because they're trying to be productive. It just feels better to their brain. Some media psychology studies even find that people with higher cognitive curiosity gravitate toward documentaries, long-form discussions, strategy games, or complex narratives. Things where you're mentally participating, rather than content that's mainly about emotional highs and lows. In other words, it's less about what's popular and more about what feels cognitively rewarding. And sports, for many people, land heavily on the emotional side. Suspense, victory, defeat, tribal loyalty, which is powerful, just not always intellectually stimulating in the same way. So when someone skips the game to watch a deep dive video, read about space, or learn a random skill at midnight, it's not antisocial or contrarian. From a psychological standpoint, it's just preference-matching wiring. Their brain is quietly choosing the kind of input that feels richer. And once you see that research trend, the difference stops feeling mysterious and starts feeling predictable. You can actually see this difference most clearly not in a lab or a study, but in a completely ordinary Tuesday night. Picture 2 people finishing work at the same time. One drops onto the couch, turns on the game, and suddenly 3 hours disappear. There's always something happening: highlights, commentary, group chats, score updates. It's easy, automatic. The night fills itself. The other person sits down and thinks, what do I feel like doing? Maybe they open a book they've been meaning to finish. Maybe they fall into a YouTube rabbit hole about ancient history or space travel. Maybe they start sketching an idea, coding a small project, reorganizing their room, journaling, or just staring out the window thinking. From the outside, it can look random, even unproductive, but internally it feels absorbing. Time passes the same way, fast, unnoticed, just through a different channel. It's not that one person has discipline and the other doesn't. It's not about willpower. It's about where attention naturally flows when no one is forcing it. Some minds gravitate toward shared, external events, what's happening out there right now with everyone else. Other minds drift inward, toward ideas, possibilities, private interests, little mental puzzles only they care about. One person remembers scores and player stats. Another remembers concepts, theories, strange facts they stumbled across at midnight. Neither choice is planned. It's almost automatic. And if you pay attention to your own life, you might recognize the pattern instantly. When you finally get free time, where does your brain go without effort? Toward the crowd, or toward your own thoughts? That quiet pull says a lot more about your psychology than you might think. There's also something else shaping all of this that has nothing to do with your brain chemistry or your personality. The environment itself has changed. Sports today aren't just 90 minutes on a field and then everyone goes home. They've quietly evolved into a 24/7 media ecosystem. It's not just the game anymore. It's the pre-game analysis, the post-game breakdowns, the trade rumors, the highlight reels, the podcasts, the memes, the fantasy leagues, the constant score notifications buzzing in your pocket. It's basically a serialized drama that never ends. Every day there's a new episode. Every hour there's an update. Every app is gently tapping your shoulder saying, "Did you see this play? Did you hear this news? Your team might win tonight." From a psychological perspective, that's incredibly powerful. Because the more frequently something appears in your environment, the more your brain starts to treat it as important. Familiarity turns